G'day legends, welcome back. Lachie here. You know, there is a specific moment in every Aussie's financial journey when the game completely changes. It's like flicking a switch. One day, you're logging into your ComSec or Vanguard app, feeling like you're pushing a boulder uphill in thongs. You're scrimping, saving, skipping the smashed avo, but the balance barely moves. And then, suddenly, you wake up one morning, check your portfolio, and realize your money has made more cash in a year than some blokes earn working 9 to 5 flat out. It's not magic, mate. It's not winning the Powerball. It's mathematics. Pure and simple. There are 3 specific net worth milestones where this transformation happens so dramatically that your wealth building shifts into overdrive. I spend an embarrassing amount of time thinking about compound interest, superannuation, and why so many of us get stuck living paycheck to paycheck, or pay packet to pay packet, despite earning decent coin. If you're tired of watching your savings grow at the speed of a sleepy koala, and you actually want to understand when your net worth starts working harder than a tradie on a Friday arvo, make sure to subscribe. Smash that like button if you want to finally see the light at the end of the tunnel specifically for us down under. Now, before we dive into these 3 game-changing tipping points, let me ask you something. When you think about building wealth in Australia, what comes to mind? Maybe you picture some bloke in a tailored suit on Collins Street making high-frequency trades. Or maybe someone who inherited a massive property portfolio in Bondi from their great-aunt Shazza. But here's the truth that might surprise you. The people who actually build substantial wealth in this country aren't necessarily the ones on the highest incomes or the ones taking punt-style risks on crypto. They are the ones who understand something that sounds almost too simple to be true. Your net worth doesn't grow in a straight line. It grows like a snowball rolling down Mount Buller. It starts off tiny, fragile, and slow. But as it rolls, it picks up snow, gets heavier, and eventually accelerates until it becomes an unstoppable force that could smash through a brick wall. And there are 3 specific points on that mountain where the snowball picks up so much momentum that everything changes. These aren't random numbers I pulled out of thin air. These are mathematically proven thresholds where compound interest stops being a theory in a textbook and starts changing your life in a real world. The first tipping point happens at $100,000. The second occurs around $650,000. And the third milestone, the big one that completely transforms your relationship with money, hits at $1 million. But hold your horses. Here's what's fascinating about these numbers. Most people reckon reaching $100,000 means you're just 10% of the way to becoming a millionaire. They are completely wrong. And this misunderstanding is exactly why so many Aussies throw in the towel before they ever see the real magic happen. They give up right before the good bit. Let me paint you a picture of what most people think wealth building looks like. They imagine it's this perfectly predictable linear process. You save $1, you're $1 closer. Save 10 grand, you're 10 grand closer. Save 50 grand, you're 50 grand closer. Makes sense, right? Except it's completely backwards from how money actually works when you invest it properly in the market. The reality is far more encouraging than most people realize, but it requires a level of patience that our instant gratification culture doesn't exactly celebrate. We live in a world where you can get Uber Eats delivered in 20 minutes, stream any footy match in seconds, and buy practically anything on Amazon with one click. The idea of waiting decades for anything sounds absolutely barbaric to most people. Wait 10 years. You're dreaming, mate. But here's the thing that separates people who build wealth from people who spend their entire lives wondering why they can't get ahead despite earning a good wage. Money doesn't just sit there doing nothing when you invest it correctly. It starts working for you. It earns returns. And then those returns start earning their own returns. It's like employing a little army of workers who never sleep, never take a smoko, and never ask for a pay rise. This isn't some get-rich-quick scheme or financial fairy tale. This is basic mathematics that has been creating millionaires for generations. Yet somehow, most people either don't understand it or don't believe it actually works for them. The secret lies in understanding compound interest. Einstein supposedly called it the 8th wonder of the world. Whether he said it or not, the sentiment is bang on. Those who understand it, earn it. Those who don't, pay it. Let me show you exactly how this works with some real numbers relevant to us here in AUS. Imagine you decide to invest $750 every month. That's roughly $185 a week. Now, I know things are tight. The cost of living is through the roof, petrol is expensive, and a bag of chips is like $7. But $185 a week isn't impossible for most working adults. We are talking about packing your lunch instead of buying it, cutting back on a few pints at the pub, or maybe cancelling a couple of streaming services you don't watch anyway. Now, assuming your investments earn an average return of 7% annually, which is actually quite conservative compared to historical performance of the ASX 200 or the S&P 500. Here's where things get interesting. It takes approximately 7 years and 9 months of consistent monthly contributions to reach your first $100,000. 7 years and 9 months. I know, that sounds like a lifetime, especially when you're just starting out and watching your mates go on Euro summer holidays while you're stashing cash. But think about it this way. 7 years ago, were you the same person you are today? Time has a funny way of passing whether you're building wealth or not. The time is going to pass anyway. You might as well have $100,000 to show for it at the end. During those first 7 to 8 years, most of the money accumulating in your account comes directly from your own hard yakka. You are doing the heavy lifting. Compound interest is still warming up on the bench, putting its boots on. Out of that first $100,000, roughly $69,000 comes from your own pocket, your monthly contributions. The remaining $31,000 represents the returns your money has generated. Not bad for money that's just sitting there. But admittedly, it's not going to change your life overnight. You're not retiring to the Gold Coast just yet. Here's where most people make a critical mistake. They look at those numbers and think, this is taking forever. It's too slow. Or they get discouraged because the returns don't seem impressive enough compared to the effort they're putting in. What they don't realize is that they've just completed the hardest part of the entire journey. They've pushed the boulder up the steepest part of the hill. They've built the foundation that will support everything that comes next. It's like spending years learning a trade. The apprenticeship is tough, the pay is low, and the work is hard. But once you're qualified, things change. Remember, we are trying to get to $1 million, and you've just hit 100,000. In traditional thinking, you'd assume you're only 10% of the way there. But compound interest doesn't work like that. The truth is far more encouraging. From this point forward, your money starts working much harder for you. Those investment returns that seemed modest during the first 8 years begin to snowball in ways that will genuinely surprise you. The next milestone is $200,000. And here's the kicker that blows most people's minds. It only takes about 5 more years to get there. Let me repeat that because it's important. It took nearly 8 years to go from 0 to 100K, but only 5 additional years to double that amount. We are now 13 years into your investment journey, and you're sitting at $200,000. The mathematics is starting to shift in your favor big time. At this point, compound interest is really beginning to flex its muscles. Of that $200,000, you've personally contributed significantly less percentage-wise than in the first leg. Your money has been quietly working in the background, earning returns on returns, and suddenly those gains are becoming substantial. But here's the part that will absolutely blow your mind, and it's why that first $100,000 milestone is so psychologically important. Even though you've only reached $200,000, you're actually much closer to becoming a millionaire than the numbers suggest. This is where that original claim about the first 100K being the hardest starts to make perfect sense. The reason this works is that compound interest is exponential, not linear. Each dollar of growth generates its own future growth. Now, you might be wondering what happens during the next stretch toward that magical 7-figure milestone. This is where things get really exciting, and honestly, a little bit addictive to watch. During the next phase, as you continue making those same monthly contributions, compound interest becomes the dominant force in your wealth-building equation. By the time you hit the 18-year mark, you've reached $400,000. Your personal contributions are becoming a smaller and smaller piece of the pie compared to the growth. Think about what this means in practical terms. You're now earning decent coin just from investment returns. Remember how long it took you to accumulate your first 100K? Now your portfolio is generating massive value annually without you lifting a finger. The beautiful part about this whole process is that it doesn't require you to live like a hermit. We are talking about setting aside $750 a month. For many Aussies, that's just being smart with your tax return, maybe salary sacrificing a bit into super, and being conscious about discretionary spending. This isn't about depriving yourself of a flat white or never going to a barbie with your mates. It's about consistency. The person who understands this principle and acts on it will build substantial wealth. The person who keeps waiting for the perfect time or for the market to crash so they can buy the bottom will likely spend their entire life wondering what could have been. And frankly, that's kind of tragic because we are literally talking about basic maths here. The acceleration becomes even more dramatic as you move beyond that $400,000 mark. By year 22, you're looking at $600,000. And this brings us to our second major tipping point, $650,000. This is where things get really interesting from a lifestyle perspective. $650,000 in productive assets represents something that most people never truly understand until they experience it firsthand. Here's why this milestone is so significant. The median full-time income in Australia is hovering around $90,000 to $95,000 per year. That's achieved by someone having to sell their time to an employer, dealing with the commute, the office politics, and the daily grind. But with $650,000 invested properly, earning an 8% return, that generates $52,000 in investment income. Now, I know what you're thinking. $52,000 isn't $90,000, Lachie. True, but think about it. That is $1,000 a week of passive income. That is enough to cover the rent in many places. Maybe not a penthouse in Sydney, but certainly a decent spot in Adelaide, Perth, or regional Vic. Or it covers your groceries, bills, and petrol with change to spare. For the average Aussie household, reaching $650,000 in investments represents a major psychological breakthrough. Suddenly, you realize you're generating significant passive income that can supplement your wage. This is what we call coast fire or financial security. You could still go to work if you wanted to, using your salary to accelerate your wealth building even further. Or, you could drop down to part-time work. Imagine working 3 days a week instead of 5, because your portfolio covers the difference. It's like having your cake and eating it too, except the cake keeps getting bigger even while you're eating it. This is the point where most people start to breathe a little easier financially. The fear of financial ruin shrinks dramatically. Losing a job becomes an inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. The washing machine breaking down doesn't ruin your month. You have options that simply don't exist for people living pay packet to pay packet. But there's something else that happens at this level that's even more important than the financial security. Your entire relationship with risk changes. When you have substantial assets working for you, you can afford to take calculated risks. Maybe you've always wanted to start your own business, maybe a landscaping gig or a consulting firm, but were too afraid to give up the steady paycheck. When your investments are covering your basic survival expenses, you can afford to take that leap. Perhaps you want to upskill? Go back to uni. When you're not worried about paying the rent next week, you can invest in yourself. Or maybe you just want to travel. Do the big lap around Australia in a caravan while you're still young enough to enjoy it, rather than waiting until you're 70 with a bad back. This is what real wealth looks like. It has nothing to do with driving a Porsche or wearing a Rolex to impress people you don't even like. It's about having choices.
No, thanks.
It's about being able to say yeah, nah to things that don't serve you, and too right to things that do.
No thanks.
Now, some of you are probably screaming at your screens. What about inflation, Lachie? What about the cost of living crisis? Fair question. It's a legitimate concern, especially with how expensive things are getting at Woolies and Coles. But it's actually built into the strategy. If you're generating 8% returns annually and only living off maybe 4% or 5% of your portfolio, the remaining growth helps your investments keep pace with inflation. Your principal amount increases, which means your passive income increases too. You're not just maintaining your purchasing power, you're growing it. Plus, there's something huge that most Aussies forget to factor in: superannuation. In the US, they have Social Security, which is questionable. But here, we have a robust super system. Your employer is legally required to put money aside for you. By the time you hit preservation age, usually 60, you'll likely have a nice chunk of change waiting for you on top of these personal investments we are talking about. Then there's the age pension. Now, I'm not saying you should rely on the pension. It's not a lot of money, but it's a safety net. When you combine your personal portfolio of $650K, plus your super, plus potentially the age pension later on, mate, you are looking at a very, very comfortable lifestyle. You're not eating baked beans for dinner unless you want to. But let me tell you what happens when you finally cross that magical 7-figure threshold. Because this is where things get genuinely mind-bending. The third milestone, $1 million. Reaching your first $1 million isn't just a number on a screen. It represents a complete psychological transformation. When you hit that $1 million milestone, which happens around year 29 of consistent investing at $750 a month, and potentially much faster if you increase your contributions as your salary grows. Something shifts in your brain. You'll feel an overwhelming sense of relief. You'll think, finally, all those years of driving the old Toyota Corolla and bringing leftovers to work have actually amounted to something. It's like crossing the finish line of a marathon. The prize isn't just a medal. It's the ability to sleep soundly at night for the rest of your life. You won't necessarily feel rich. In Sydney or Melbourne, $1 million might not even buy you a detached house anymore. We all know the property market is bonkers, but having $1 million in investable assets, shares, ETFs, bonds, is completely different from having $1 million tied up in your house. You can't eat your house, but you can live off the dividends and growth of a $1 million portfolio. You will feel validated. You'll realize that building wealth isn't just for the top end of town or people who got lucky on Bitcoin. As a regular employee with a regular salary, you've proven that the system actually works if you have the discipline to stick with it. Here's what's fascinating about reaching this milestone. Your first million gives you a massive psychological unlock. Possibilities open up everywhere. Maybe you want to get into angel investing? Or perhaps buy an investment property now that you have a massive deposit ready to go. Your net worth opens doors that were previously locked tight. The fear of financial catastrophe basically vanishes. With a $1 million portfolio, you can generate $40,000 to $50,000 per year in passive income very safely, or up to $80,000 in a good year of 8% returns. That's a full-time wage for many people, generated without you working a single hour. That is genuine freedom. But here's where this gets really interesting, and it's something that separates the millionaires from the multimillionaires. Some folks get comfortable after hitting 7 figures and basically coast. They take the foot off the gas. Big mistake. The people who understand wealth building realize that reaching your first million is like graduating from uni. It's a huge accomplishment, but it's just the beginning. From this point forward, the mathematics becomes absolutely ridiculous in your favor. To get from 1 million to 1.5 million, you only need your portfolio to grow by 50%. That can happen in just a few good years in the market. To reach 2 million, you only need your investments to double. Historically, in the share market, money doubles every 7 to 10 years. The jump from 2 million to 3 million only requires a 50% increase. Each subsequent million becomes easier and easier. This is where wealthy people start thinking differently about money and time. They understand that every dollar has the potential to become multiple dollars through compound growth. That fancy dinner in the CBD costing $300? It's not just $300. It's potentially $3,000 of lost future wealth over the next few decades. Now, I'm not saying don't enjoy your life. You gotta enjoy the journey, but understanding this trade-off is powerful. Now, I hear the skeptics in the back. Lachie, this sounds great, but what about a market crash? What if the ASX tanks? Legitimate concern. That's why we diversify. We don't put all our eggs in one basket. We buy ETFs that track the global market, not just Australian shares. And here's the thing about crashes that most people don't realize. If you are consistently investing over decades, market crashes are actually your friend. When the market drops, shares are on sale. Your $750 monthly contribution buys more units. When the market eventually recovers, and it always has, historically, those extra units you picked up on the cheap become incredibly valuable. So, there you have it. 3 tipping points that transform your net worth from a slow crawl to an unstoppable force. $100,000. When compound interest finally wakes up and starts pulling its weight. $650,000. When your money generates substantial passive income that rivals a part-time wage. $1 million. When you realize you've basically won the financial game. The maths doesn't lie, even if it requires more patience than our fast-paced society appreciates. Start investing consistently today, whether it's into your super or a personal brokerage account, because 20 or 30 years from now, you'll either be thanking yourself while sipping a cold one on a beach, or wondering what could have been. I know which one I'd prefer. Thanks for watching, legends. If you found this helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more Aussie finance content. Catch YA in the next one.